Hey folks, so Facebook is a pretty cool thing. Yesterday I got a thing up on my timeline of some photos, and they were photos that I had taken, or I was in 2 years ago, and they were during the polar plunge. And so if you don't know, polar plunge is like a charity thing that you do where you basically you strip down to your bathing suit in the middle of winter, and you go and you run into some freezing cold water. And so that year I was called, a friend of ours asked to do it, and I said, absolutely, I'll do it. And so I went and did the polar plunge. And I was standing in the warming tent after the plunge, and everybody's like dying, and I was like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And some guy goes to me, are you freaking crazy? Well, I had been doing cold water exposure for a pretty long time prior to that, where I would just soak in cold water after every workout. Why? Because I'm crazy? No. The reason I do that was for the recuperative, but also because cold water activates, cold actually activates some resources in your body, some hormones in your body that nobody really talks about. And one of them is called irisin, the other one is called adiponectin or pectin, I think. But anyway, they're activated in cold response. And there's something else that gets activated, and that's called thyroid releasing hormone. So normally, under normal circumstances, your body will release a hormone called thyroid stimulating hormone. It's from your pituitary, and it's from your brain. It goes from your brain to your thyroid, and it tells your brain, hey, make some thyroid hormone and let it go. Well, thyroid releasing hormone bypasses that and tells the thyroid from the brain, release thyroid hormone right now. And so the difference is, one is a suggestion, and then the other one is, shrinkage. So the other one's a suggestion, and the other one's a demand. So what happens is your body then immediately releases thyroid hormone. The role of thyroid hormone is to stimulate base metabolic rate. So you go from, let's say, you're a 4-cylinder motor, suddenly you have the metabolic demands of an 8-cylinder motor. So you have to use more fuel. The body then goes out and says, we need to burn more fuel. And so it activates lipolysis, or basically fat activation into energy. It's the most efficient means of getting energy up quickly. And so the studies have been done they did it on rats, then they also did it on people, but they took rats that were fed a high-fat diet in normal temperature and observed what happened to them metabolically, and then they exposed them to cold. And what they found was cold exposure actually changed how they processed fats and how they metabolically activated them. So the reason I'm talking about this today, because I got reminded of something, from a Facebook photo, but also because it's relevant to this crowd of people. And so here's why I say that. We walk around in pretty much a 70-degree bubble all day, all night, all the time. So you go from your house in the morning. Most people keep their thermostat, 65, 70, 72, depending on what you like. You raise your thermostat in the wintertime to keep your house warm, and you walk around pretty bundled up, and you're never really truly cold. Or if you're cold, it's kind of relative. Like somebody will be in a room with you and they'll say, oh, it's cold in here. And you'll say, no, I'm fine, or I'm cold too, whatever. But for the most part, our lives are now a 70-degree bubble. So you come from your house, you get up in the morning, you leave, you get in your car, it's also 70 degrees. You drive to work, it's 70 degrees. Then you get in your car and you drive home again, and it's 70 degrees, 70 degrees, 70 degrees, 70 degrees. So your ability to adapt to what's called hormetic stresses of the environment get reduced, and it affects your base metabolic rate. So if you're in a colder situation, then the likelihood is that your body is going to have to adapt. This adaptation actually changes your metabolism. So for example, Michael Phelps, everyone's talking about how Michael Phelps eats 8,000 calories a day to maintain his body weight. Well, Michael Phelps is a really big dude, first of all, and he swims a lot. But what nobody ever says is he's swimming in something like 80-degree water, which doesn't sound cold, except for the fact that water dissipates heat 20 times faster than air. So if you just sat in 80-degree water for long enough, you would get hypothermic and you would die. So it might be, 16, 18, however many hours, but it could actually kill you based on how efficient your body is. So hypothermia can occur at temperatures that we seem to buffer and think they're not so bad. So, and just as an aside from that, I was in the Dominican Republic, and we went to go swim with the sharks and the things at the bottom. They're like sharks who look like torpedoes laying at the bottom of this thing. And anyway, all these guys who were in the Dominican, then when they get in the water, they were wearing wetsuits, and I was laughing. I was like, what are you wearing a wetsuit for? It's like, oh, it's too cold. And the water was 80 something degrees. So they had completely climatized to their environment. Whereas for me, coming from somewhere north, my ability to adapt to that hormetic shock was vastly better than theirs. And then I had done, not at that time, but later I had started to experiment with cold water exposure. So cold water exposure can be done very simply. It can be done in the shower. You can take a contrast shower, hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. And what that does is that changes adaptation. And what you're going to see is your insulin sensitivity will go up dramatically as you were under a cold stress. It sounds kind of miserable. And here's the truth. A cold shower to me is worse than a cold bath. Now, people disagree with that, and I'm fine with that. Whatever floats your boat. But what I would do is I would fill my tub with water as cold as it could be. I didn't have to add any ice or anything. And in the wintertime, that water got to be pretty cold. And then I'd go in there and soak. And for 2 minutes, it was not fun. It was definitely not fun. But after 2 minutes or so, you're basically numb. And so it doesn't bother you anymore. And then I'd set a timer for, 15 minutes. And I would do that. And I would do that 3, sometimes 4 times a week. And what I noticed was that entire winter, I never felt the need to wear coats. I never felt like I needed to be bundled up because my body had adapted. The hormetic stress of the temperature had adapted. I also lost a ton of body fat and got stronger. And these are all adaptations from those hormones I talked about, irisin and adiponectin. So body can adapt and do some crazy things if you stress it. The reason I'm posting this in a metabolic group is because the 70-degree bubble that we live in is actually causing more metabolic disease. There are 2 other factors that come into play that nobody talks about. So nobody ever talks about cold exposure, but it's in my book. So I just finished my book, and so it's in my book. And also what's called circadian mismatch. So circadian mismatch has to do with light cycles. So in the summer, there's more natural light in your environment. And so as a result, the genetics, what's called chronobiology, the genetics of your body is actually changed due to longer light cycles. So one of the signals outside of different genes, they're called peer 1 and peer 2 genes, is to switch a gene on or switch a gene off based on light cycles. So the long light cycle has a different impact than a short light cycle. And so in the wintertime, our genetics is set up to do A, and in the summertime, it's set up to do B. But when we're constantly exposed to blue light, like our computers, our phones, our laptops, our TVs, we get into a programming based on what's happening to us of a continuous summer at 70 degrees. So we have a continuous summer of 70 degrees in terms of temperature and also light. And this actually changes how our body responds to what we fuel it with. So when we start to eat different foods, when we start to eat different types of macronutrient mixes, it is actually, our genes are going to influence that to some degree. Now, the last thing we want to talk about is, we talked about cold, we talked about circadian mismatch, and we just want to talk about light itself. So light itself is not just information. It's not just to say, hey, make vitamin D. It's also a set of instructions. So in our brains, we have this basically this little sensor, and it sits between our optic nerves, and it's called the suprachiastic nucleus. And that will be on the test. The suprachiastic nucleus. And the suprachiastic nucleus is basically orientating our body to light. So, and it's an important thing. Our skin is photoreceptive, is photosensitive. Our eyes are photoreceptive and photosensitive. So we know that these have impacts on how our immune systems work. It has an impact on how we process and work through our metabolism. And all of these things that seem like they have not a lot of impact can have enormous impact because they change how we sleep. So we want to turn our bodies into a metabolic furnace. So for example, when you have livestock in the wintertime, the reason that livestock don't freeze is that you feed them more, and they turn more of those calories into heat than they do in fattening their bodies. So you have to feed them extra because they're dissipating a lot. They're using a lot more heat to keep their bodies maintained at a homeostatic place. The last component of what we're going to talk about is sleep. And I actually talk about this as well in the book. So sleep is vitally important to metabolic function. So if you are not sleeping well, studies have been done, college students, same exercise routine, same diet, the only variable that they changed was their sleep length. So they had one group be sleep deprived and the other one not. Sleep deprivation, just for a day or two, causes insulin sensitivity to drop and insulin resistance to go up. If you do it in a chronic basis, it actually changes your body composition. So what they noticed was in these college students is that their body composition actually changed just because they were sleep deprived. So how many people are running around saying, I can get by with 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night, and then they have metabolic disease? The sleep that they're depriving themselves of is damaging them in a systemic way. Sleep deprivation will absolutely tip the favor towards metabolic disease. It's unequivocal. So we have cold, we have light, we have circadian mismatch, and we have sleep deprivation. Every one of these topics I talk about in the book. Every single one. Because it's not just a matter of your macros. It's not just a matter of how many carbs you're eating, how much protein how much fat you're eating, what supplements you're taking. These all matter, but there are other things that are overlooked. So if you get on different sites, you're going to see the same discussions over and over again, and there's still a lot of people who are having tons of problems and they're following all these instructions, and it's because they basically have forgotten that human beings are animals. You know, we follow the natural laws of the earth. We follow the circadian rhythm of the sun. We follow the basic rules that every animal follows. We just might be a little smarter, maybe a little, I don't know, but not a lot, but a little. But we follow the basic rules of the earth, and we have to realize that there are natural forces, light, temperature, sleep cycles, all of these things at play, and nobody really thinks about them and nobody talks about them. Well, before I do and talk about these things, I always experiment. I usually experiment on myself. And for years, I was chronically sleep deprived. And I always thought it's like a badge. Oh, I only need 4 hours of sleep a night because, I'm a whatever. But I was fooling myself. So not only do you have increased insulin resistance when you don't sleep, but you also have what's called decision fatigue. So you get tired faster in your decision making, and you make poor decisions, and you're also more likely to be undisciplined in your diet and your lifestyle that day because your threshold is low. So your bandwidth is lower if you're not sleeping adequately. So if you can only process this many things throughout the day and then you're sleep deprived, that bandwidth goes way down, and then you're making poor decisions, and you might make a bunch of them. And the answer is you're tired, and you go, I'm just not right today. Go to sleep, So we've already talked about quite a bit on this this site, but we talked about fasting a lot. We've talked about intermittent fasting. I talked about insulin resistance, but I have all of these keys that go together to open up all the locks that reside inside of human beings. And it's a systemic approach. It's incorporating multiple factors that are easy to do, that cost very little, but have dramatic effects on human health. And they won't be talking about it. You're not going to see it on the news. You're not going to see it anywhere. Your doctor's not going to tell you about it, because nobody makes more money if you just sleep better. Nobody makes more money if you don't need diabetic drugs. Nobody makes more money if you just make better food choices. It's not how it works. Diabetes and metabolic disease is an industry. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. It's a big, big industry. And guess what? It's getting ready to hit a boom, an unprecedented boom, as we have 100 million Americans that are either pre-diabetic or diabetic, and they don't know it. So when we do blood work and we see insulin resistance, we know you're diabetic. Even though you might not quite have the diagnosis diabetes, you are diabetic. You're just undiagnosed. You're quote unquote pre-diabetic. And the telltale sign, the canary in the coal mine, is your insulin levels going up. And some of the symptoms, they get treated wrong all the time, which is like you go to the doctor and your blood pressure is up, and they give you a blood pressure medication, when the problem could be you're insulin resistant, that you're not sleeping properly, that your 70-degree bubble that you're existing in is not allowing your body to adapt to the stresses being placed on it. So these are the types of things we delve down deeper into, and just try to get somebody to really understand how to take care of their vessel, their flesh animal that they've been lent to roam around this planet in. So I'm going to try to input these things into your consciousness so that you can make better choices about how you take care of your body. And the effects can be astounding. I just, it's funny because you say, oh, I just saw a person, I just saw a guy last night. He's lost, 26 pounds in just over a month. Where he said he could never lose weight before. And when I did his workup, his blood sugar and his A1C were actually really good, but his insulin was high. And I said, look, your insulin's high. You're going to get, you're pre-diabetic right now. And he's like, oh no, my doctor said I was fine. I said, in terms of what they've measured, they're right. In terms of what I measured, I am telling you in 5 years or whatever, you're going to be type 2 diabetic. So this is the kind of stuff that we're doing. This is the kind of thing we're working on. So if you have questions, if you have comments, leave them here. I try to do my best to answer everything. Please like and share. If you know somebody that could benefit from this, please like and share, and I will be happy to try to give more information. Or you can also invite people to this group, and it doesn't cost anything. They can come in for free. The information is for free. And they can come into this group and ask questions, and I will be thrilled to listen to their questions and offer help that I can, because that's what my talents are. My talent to basically coach and help people to achieve an optimal level of health. So I like to help people with metabolic diseases heal, and that's it. That's what I'm gonna do. That's where I'm headed, because I see what is out there and I see what's missing, and I know that the answers have already been discovered. I know that it's just a matter of implementing them. So that's it. Like and share. Any questions, any comments, leave them here. Probably put this on YouTube as well. If you're not already following me on YouTube, just Google Dr. Talorico, Talorico on YouTube. My main page is Dr. Talorico on Facebook. There's 9,000 some people in there. And then metabolic programming is my metabolism group, which is where you're seeing this. But feel free to like and share anywhere you want. I'm trying to help people. I want people to get well. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Enjoy.